So let's go over some additional stuff. So let me pop over to Fusion. So last class we went over, and let me shift N to go to auto assign view. Um, and this is just auto coloring so you can see more clearly. This is what I worked on last week. Just building up from working with from a canvas and roughly drawing that out. It's not exact. It's pretty close. Again, if you were working from an image, I don't require it to be an exact copy. It's your version, that's fine. This is just much more of it's a way for you to get started. And we briefly went over how to get different levels and such. And right now, what you're seeing is, and I just picked these numbers, distances and such, just at random. And let me hide that logo again. This is just different ways to get different levels because you're going to be printing this as a single object. Because so if you try to make everything the same size or the same height, the same extrusion height, and if it's all touching each other, it just turns into a solid biscuit, and you've just made just a disc. That's all. Because that's how it's going to translate. If you work these at different heights, you can get variation out of that. Also, if you are interested, you can work double-sided and such too. Just more options. Not a requirement. It's there for you. Now, what we can't do, technically, there are obviously ways to do so, is printing these in different colors. Yes, we actually can because you can add stops to change colors, or you could actually make these if it's like an inset like this Phoenix symbol into the circle. I could make these separately, print them separately in separate colors, and then stick them together physically, or stick them in and glue them together physically. So obviously there's those workarounds. So all right. So what I wanted to talk about in reference of different levels and such is, let me switch over to my ducky coin. This is just playing with different heights, of course, as well as spacing between. If you wanted to show greater definition, say something like it has an eye, you can leave a space between something and then extrude only that inset. This has a little notch cutouts for the twinkle in the ducky's eye. You can play with all this kind of stuff like this. Now, again, this is based around a circle simply because it was easy to draw in this example. One of the requirements is you do need to have some sort of a hole in it for a keychain or so to go through. Now, if you like your design as is, you don't have to put a hole in it. We can add something to that. So that's where I wanted to start first. So whatever the orientation is, does not matter, totally up to you. I can start a new sketch, which that's going to be the name of the game, start a new sketch. But remember, because I'm building something additional, while I can go back in, right click and edit sketch and go back and add it to the original sketches, there's no need for this. I can add it later. Or if you do want to, you could do that. Remember, parametric modeling as this is, it will just recalculate that into all of the steps you've added in between. Sometimes that can cause errors because it either is or isn't already included in part of the design. Just so you know, that can happen. So that's why I'm going to start a new sketch after the fact. Now, anytime you start, it's going to bring up the origin planes, so you can select which one. If you're having difficulty selecting, because unfortunately, the scale of the plane selection stays the same despite you zooming in and out. So if you have difficulty selecting what you're trying to get at and it keeps trying to select something else, just hide what you're working on for the moment. That's all. So I'm selecting just that original plane. That's all. So if I orbit down, it's all in the same. Home button, there we are. And if you need to hide it just for now, great. I'm going to go to the top because I want to add like a little keychain component up here. So you have obviously a variety of options. Use like center circles before and such like that. But let me show you a couple of the other options we have within circles. You can start with the center circle, of course. 2-point circles are very helpful for doing exactly kind of this. If you want to actually have something directly touching something already and reference between 2 points, anything like that. There are, of course, 3-point circles. Get the idea. Tangent circles are really great for sticking down in between corners. And same for 3 tangent circles, fitting circle shapes in between different pre-existing shapes. So in this, I'm just going to use 2-point. And what I want to do is I'm going to snap just to the edge, and you can see what happens is I bring my cursor onto that cross section, and I'm just going, or it makes those different symbols, and I'm just going to go up a larger amount. Now, how big? I'm not necessarily directly making the hole itself. I'm going to make something that goes around the hole. With this case. So I could say, like, I don't know, if I want the hole to be like 3 or 4 millimeters, I'll add plenty of extra space. I could do like make it 20 millimeters. Or if you really don't know, don't connect it already. In this case, I'm going to create a center point circle then. All right. And I know I want that to be like 3 millimeters. All right, cool. I don't know how big I want to make this yet because I want to make sure there's enough material around this circle and then connect everything. Okay. So with that, I'm going to either create center point circle or, I could use the offset from here. So I know that I want to have like at least a 1 millimeter or whatever, in this case, 2 or 3 millimeters around that circle. So let's just say 3, make it kind of big. Okay. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this kind of recessed and such like that, not unlike the thing already is. And from here, I could either move this over and connect it, or I could draw lines, whatever I want to connect these. So let's try moving it. So one of the things you're going to run into, and see if it happens, I'm going to use a select all or a select only selected box, which means click and drag from the left to the right. And if I hit move, it's going to automatically select the center, and it actually does move. Okay, good. Sometimes, especially when you use a center point circle, and this is usually when it has relation to the origin point, the very center of your virtual workspace, it will lock those coordinates in place because it's referencing the absolute center of your drawing. It will lock it in there and you're not able to move it for anything. And if you run into that, let me just cancel this move. If you run into that issue, what you can do, just select or mouse over that center, right click, and excuse me, click delete coincidence. Coincidence is it's referencing that stuff. So from there, then you can move it, which already wasn't a problem for me. But if that happens to you, if you're trying to, you select something, you try to move it, it will not move, find where it's referencing, right click it, delete coincidence. Then you can move it in place. Okay, cool. So I can do this manually, or let's select those and let's see. I want to have those connect. Let's move it by point to point then. All right, move. If you're trying to move and you're not sure if it's not going to sync up just right because it's moving a little bit larger each time, you can use by point. So I can select points, and if I don't have anything, you have to make one, which makes it really frustrating. In this case, it's not going to let me because I only have that single point there. So I'd actually have to create a point. That's irritating. So, what's that? Yeah. Yeah, you have to actually create point. So if that's the case, mouse down, point, and I'm selecting right there. I made a dot. I made a dot. That's all. I just created points. So just showing you different ways you can move stuff, but otherwise you can just do it manually. So there you go. Move it around. If I need to use point to point, now I can do that. Select there, snaps it in place. Like I said, you can very much freehand a lot of this, but if you need stuff to actually go where it needs to go, you have to know how to be able to do some of this stuff. All right, there you go. Right there, it's in place. What I might want to do is kind of round this stuff out, something like that. I can draw just a line and a line. And obviously that cuts in between and such. If I want to make that actually fit as a tangent, use a constraint line. Select tangent. That line, I want it to be a tangent off of that circle. It moves the line up. Same for over here. Select the line again, select to that circle. It just extends the line much further, but now it is a tangent to both of those. You don't have to do this. I'm just showing you if you are nitpicky like I am. I'm not saying that's grade-wise. I'm saying that's for if I'm making something. Problem is, it also moved my circle up. Oh. So that's one of the issues with adding additional lines and such, or adding additional constraints. So if you run into that, you might have to retool some stuff. So just know that one of the ways to get around that is, all right, well, as frustrating and foolish as this is, I now know where my tangent point is on that one. Make a new line and just kind of extend down, and might just have to kind of throw something out there, whatever. Now I got a new line. Now I can use a tangent from there to there. It's really irritating that constraints can start to automatically move stuff, and unfortunately, that's just the way that the commands work. So just be aware that that can happen, and if it does, you might just have to make a new line based off of the points you just made. And if there you go. What's that? Yeah, it's deciding what to break, and it basically just depends on the hierarchy of what is more important and more of what is the more recent constraint you're trying to add. So there you go. Got that. What might the other circles and such be good for? You could use a 2-point circle. It doesn't work on a tangent circle. It doesn't work on circles. So if you're wanting something like a rounded out line here, you would have to do something like the 2-point circle. You can select something on here, something on there, but that kind of just turns into a big ball. So if you're wanting this to round out, best thing I have found is draw straight line up and down. And if you're not sure, there you go. At least that's straight up and down. And again, now we're back to tangent, blah, 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 blah. Okay, good. So that line is tangent now. So now if I want, one of the other things I want to talk to y'all more about is fillets. Now, fillets make a corner round. That's really that. That's really what it is. It's an arc based off of a radius. So it's just a partial circle based into that corner. So what I'm going to do, select it there, and it's not going to let me use that because that line is a projection. Let me explain. The reason this is purple is because this circle here is the circle that I drew on another sketch. Yeah, I know. That's the kind of stuff that gets really frustrating. This is why sometimes you do want to make sure you're building everything on the same sketch. I'm making this more complicated than I probably need to, just because I am. So if you're wanting this kind of stuff to interact with what your drawing already was, I recommend making the stuff on the old sketch. So that's just really the rundown of when you'd really want to do that, meaning build everything off the old sketch or make new stuff. So there we go. All right, let's go back to simple. I want to quit trying to be clever with this. I just want to get the thing done. All right, I made this fancy little curve out here. Great. Let me select that curve. Let me mirror it. See if I have to make a point or something. Nope. I have to have a line there. Remember to use mirror. I'm going to just draw a line straight down the middle. Doesn't matter where it starts or ends. There you go. The problem is I don't want it to interfere with anything. So I'm going to select that line, press X, so it's a construction line. Now I can use the mirror tool, select there, select my mirror line. It just throws the line up. There we go. Okay. Don't forget to delete that thing that little doodad drawing that I made there. Okay, finish sketch. That's all I was trying to do. So now let me unhide what I was working with before, because all I wanted to do is just add a little feature into this so I have a place to put a keychain through or something. All right. So let's extrude all the things except for the circle in the middle. Now, right now, it's going to default to one-sided extrude, just going to go straight up. And if that's what you want, fine. I can extrude up or down. That's just going down because it's kind of sort of in the middle. That's what's going to happen. Or you could select something like two sides. You want it thicker and thinner, different directions, or symmetrical. You have the option to make it symmetrical. So right now it was a 1 millimeter extrusion. Is that 1 millimeter in either direction or total? So meaning if it was in one direction, if it's symmetric, it'll be 2 millimeters overall. If it's symmetrical, there you go. Now, one quick thing here is that's fine if you don't want it to go all the way. However, I do recommend to simplify things, either start at the original base, or because this was this whole ring here, I actually extruded downward. If you want to make those match, let me show you a really easy way to do this. So I'm just going to go back to one-sided extrude direction. But instead of like trying to get that to fit just right, it's a whole number, so it totally will. But if I'm not sure and I don't want to, and I don't remember what it actually is, and I don't want to measure, instead of on over here, instead of on the extent type, what this means is it's just how you're measuring how far it goes or deciding how far it goes. The next one down is to object. You can select stuff to automatically reference, or you can select distances referenced off of other things. So sketches, components, faces, whatever. So if I select to object, let me orbit under, just select the bottom of the thing. It's going to drag it directly to the bottom, so it absolutely matches, no problem. Operation automatically switches to join, so it's going to link itself to that. Bam. All done, all set, no problem. If I want to fancy this up, it automatically hides the sketches. So let's bring those back up. And I just want to play around a little bit just so, with this so I can show you just some different things you can do with this. That's real basic. That technically fits the bill. You're good. But what if I wanted to make it like some recesses or something like that? Easy thing to do. Now I could go back into the original sketch again, which might actually be the better option for this. So let me go to edit sketch. I'm just going to add some lines into this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the offset tool and just select, if it'll let me, and it's not even letting me select all that stuff. Yeah, see, it's not even letting me select all these, unfortunately. All right, so if that's the case, what I want to do is just make like a little reduced version of that. So if it's not letting you do that, let's try the other way. Oh my God, yeah, create a sketch on this surface, or before I do that, I showed this to a couple people last class. Let's experiment with this. Within extrude, there's two different options. There's the regular type, what we've been doing. There's also a thin extrude, which is based around lines. What I could do, and it kind of works like an offset. So let me select that whole surface, and I'm just going to go down a little bit. So down one. And actually, that achieved exactly what I was going to try and do. I just wanted to make it kind of recess, but kind of got a little wonky. Something there. It's going to cut the whole thing. So I can play with the different thicknesses. So wall thickness, that's real thick. Let's go to like 0.5, much thinner. There we go. If you want, you can do two sides. It's just to make it bigger, symmetric, same thing. In this case, honestly, this is one side and it's just from these sides in. Let's try it with that. Let's see what that does. So what it's going to do is it's going to cut away because I'm extruding down into things that already exists. Hit OK. There we go. So that just cut a section away. That's all. So you can play with it. You can play with the different tools to just get different features that you don't have to design in. So if I want, honestly, it would be better rather than repeating the same tool, just go back in, edit that feature, select an additional space. There you go. So it's just different ways you can play with some of these same tools. In this one, yeah, if I want to make like a little section in here, I could keep doing the same, that kind of stuff. Easy ways to add additional features. I wanted to show you also real quick, like in this, the original drawing had like an eye inside of it. So just want to show you how you could do that. Same diff, really. Instead of going back to my original sketch, all of that, I absolutely could, and that's definitely a way to do it. But in this case, because it's an isolated feature, I can keep adding sketches. Make a sketch, like I said before, how we made the text. You can actually select on surfaces and draw on those. That gets really handy when we start getting like when we start making different compound surfaces and such. So I'm gonna select right there, even though it's looking from straight down or straight above rather, it's still working in the same space. And yeah, my line kind of got a little wonky there for the original. It does not have to be exact. Just gonna draw something in there. Kind of sort of eyeball. I'll try not to make this look too messed up. Probably just could have used an ovoid from there. Remember, if you don't like how it's looking, you can always use the handlebars to tweak that. Maybe I'll make that a little bit sharper point. There you go. Okay. Hard to see because, oh, awesome. So this is one of the problems when it gets hard to see what you're doing sometimes. I thought I had selected that upper surface. In this case, it's not going to be a problem, but it actually selected the original origin plane. Great. Opportunity to show you some of the other things that you can work with on this. So, all right, I drew the eyeball in there just for the sake of conversation or sake of options and conversation, if you want to. I do want to make an offset of this, and I'm just going to create something thinner. Yes, yes, yes. It's just making. Why isn't it letting me create an offset? Okay, great. Sketch offset offers no geometry. All right, that's interesting. What? Weird. Is it too complex? All right, I've not run into that before. Yeah, yeah, that's that is frustrating to say the very least. Huh. Okay, you run into that. Sometimes these things happen. Not sure why it's doing it. So let me try a copy and paste, and then I'll just scale it down. Curious what it's doing. Oops. All right. I have no idea why it's not letting me do that. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to just scale it down. Okay. So select OK. Now the problem is I know that I have two sketches, one on top of each other. Fusion is based on what you can see. If you're running into this problem where you can't remember which one is which, if you mouse over, press and hold, it'll bring up a little selection box where you can make sure to actually catch which one or just either one. So since they're identical right now, I just selected one of them. And let's go to sketch scale. So you have to select a reference point. Sure, right there. And I'm just going to shrink it down a bit. All right, there we go. That worked. So for some reason, the scale works, but the other one does not. And I'm just going to move this over a little bit so it's floating in the center. That's what I was going to do with the offset. All right. Weird. Okay. Made the eyeball with some unnecessary additional steps, but there we are. Finish sketch. Unhide all the things again. Great. Now, if I want to extrude and cut and extrude this up, it's underneath. How do I extrude up through but still cut from the top down? This is where you can play with these selections. So I'm going to still select extrude. I'm going to select, if you can get to it, if you have trouble, remember, hide the bodies. I just want that actual inset there. So the space between. Now, by default, it starts where it's drawn. You don't have to start there. Just like using the to object and such, I can do an offset or here object. So I'm going to select the starting point as object, select that top surface, the one that I thought I'd selected to begin with. So now see how it's wanting to extrude upwards? If I drag up, you can see it's going to drag upward. There we go, which is that's your standard, your distance. But I want that to be negative. So let's select negative. Now just that recess is going to cut downward. If you want anything in between, sure, negative point. Oops, wrong order. Come on, negative 0.5. There you go. Okay. So unfortunately, I had to deal with some extra steps because something was going wonky, but there we go. All right. And of course, if you wanted to add additional features, you can do more to that. So the last thing I wanted to show you, or just talk a little bit about, was just adding edge details and such, if you want. These are your options are fillet, and as the pop-up shows, rounds out corners and such and edges based around a radius. Or chamfer, bevels an edge of a corner based of a solid or such. Same deal. Basically, the difference is, do you want a rounded edge or do you want a beveled edge? That's all. All right. So again, don't have to do this, and you can run into problems. But before I continue, I'm going to hit save, something I should have done a while ago. But I'll just note added features. And you don't have to write in notes. This is just for your own reference. Because again, when I say that, or when I type that in, I go to the data panel. It makes a new version. Come on, catch up, computer. Just keeps refreshing. There we go. So you just have your little notes there. That's all. Something for you to reference. All right, let's round some stuff out. Mainly things like if I'm putting a keychain in here, just a straight hole is going to be a problem if I'm trying to especially add like a curved chain in there. You're going to want to either fillet or chamfer that. I'd recommend a chamfer just because square thing, round, it's going to hit the corners. Select chamfer. Now you can either select just the edges of anything or you can select faces. Remember, edges are that contour line edge around, the face is the face in between. So I'm going to select that whole cylinder of that hole. And when you're doing fillets and chamfers to bodies, to corners, I highly recommend don't drag it into place, because depending on how sensitive your mouse is, you can suddenly drag like a huge number into an input and it can throw everything wonky, especially if your computer's already kind of having a little bit of trouble. Do it numerically. Start with like 1 millimeter and work up and down in increments. So with this, just not 14. See what happens when my finger slips. But at least it gives it a single number to work from, meaning that it's not trying to recalculate every move simultaneously. So there you go. So that just put a bevel on the inside there and shrinks that corner. It's kind of small, probably a little bit much. So maybe like 0.5. There you go. It's a little more reasonable. You could do a fillet there too. Same diff, just showing you some options. All right, I like where that is. I hit OK. I want to round out some stuff here. Try fillet. You can select multiple faces at once. Now, this is probably going to kind of try to error because I already have a chamfer there. Let's see what happens. Let's press 1 on that fillet. I get an error code. Okay, so if we run into that, you can hit the little X in the selection box. Let me just go here. Oops. See what happens. I selected a face instead. The problem with Fusion is being able to select things. Sometimes you're like seeing through and it selects something through the object instead of on the surface. So I'm just selecting those two surfaces. Let's see what happens with one. There we go. See, fix the problem. You can play with fillets quite a lot. You can make some pretty cool rounded out features and such. That's all. Okay. And you can keep adding these. Right click to do the same thing. Let's say I just want to do the rounded corner right there, and let's add some more. I want to select also that line, make sure it's selecting all of those. Sure, cool. All right, so let's try 1 millimeter. That might cause errors. Now, it could be because it's too large of a number, or it's I have the too large a number for too many things. So let's try something smaller first. 0.5. There you go. It was because right here it's too big. I put a 1 millimeter fillet on something that was only 2 millimeters thick, or actually less than. So it was just the fillet on both sides was too much, was more than the surface itself is. But so that's just a neat way of adding some additional features to a surface. And now I did not select this cylinder. So look how the fillet calculated around that cylinder. You can add in some features that maybe you weren't expecting to find and just make your object more interesting to you. Or, of course, this is a way of if you're actually designing a product or something for a project, you can potentially save some material or save some weight, whatever. Ultimately, when it comes to printing and such, something we're going to talk about later, but a rounded corner is stronger than a sharp corner because it creates a pinch point otherwise. Not always, but for the most part. Okay, I like that. That's kind of weird looking, neat to me. Now, I will warn you, if you try to fillet or chamfer, especially chamfer text, that is a whole heap of stuff. So you will very regularly run into issues because, especially chamfer, when you get into really tight, acute angles, it cannot calculate around that. Same with chamfer, or sorry, same with fillet. So I would pick a font that you kind of already like. And there you go. So I just wanted to show you a couple other features or a couple other things you could do. Let me hide the logo thing again. So now I just added a keychain hole to the side, and it's got kind of a neat little detail thingy. That's all. So play around with those features. Just these additional fillet and chamfer tools can add a lot to an otherwise kind of bland or just kind of square or cylindrical shape. Just a way to add features. You can of course continue to add like details like draw onto your surface and extrude downward or anything like that. Just drawing in and using the extrude tool can add a lot of features. So play around with them. Good luck with it.